Welcome, everyone. This is Mary Vandenplas, Director of Operations and Research here at Burtch Works. Today, two of our senior executive recruiters, Kit Nordmark and Karla Ahern, will share the results of our 2020 Marketing Research and Consumer Insights Salaries Study. Both Karla and Kit began their careers in the marketing research world as researchers before moving into recruiting. Karla Ahern began her career working on-site at PepsiCo as a project manager for IRI before moving to Knowledge Networks, which was GfK and now owned by Ipsos, where she focused on custom research initiatives in media, CPG, and pharmaceuticals. Prior to Burtch Works, she led business development and digital media effectiveness programs for Dime Store Media, also part of the GfA acquisition and later Ipsos. Kit Nordmark worked in the marketing research industry with a focus in qualitative research. She worked at True, a boutique insights firm specializing in youth, and most recently at the Futures Company, which is now operating as Kantar. And now, without further ado, over to Karla and Kit.
Thanks, Mary. This is Kit kicking us off today. It's a beautiful morning here in Chicago, so thanks so much for joining us. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Burtch Works, but for anyone new, we're a niche recruiting firm and have a team dedicated to helping research and insights professionals find their next roles. We work with researchers looking for new opportunities in the field, and we also partner with organizations across the U.S. to help them find great talent for their team. Because we spend our days speaking with researchers on the ground, we also pride ourselves in keeping an eye on the industry and take note of changes and shifts we observe along the way. So we hope to serve as a great resource for research and insights professionals like you in the field. To say 2020 has been an unusual year would be a vast understatement. The last 6 to 7 months have brought on change, uncertainty, and disruption across the globe as the world navigates the COVID-19 pandemic. As things began picking up in March, no one was quite sure how long we would be impacted, but here we are in October still working through the coronavirus. Things have been evolving on a daily basis and will likely continue into the months and year ahead. So of course, as part of our discussion today, we'll be talking about how things have changed in the research and insights field, as well as what we may expect moving forward. So here's a quick glance at today's agenda. First, we'll explain how we identify marketing research, just to give you a good baseline for our presentation. Then we'll cover demographics. We'll take a look at median salaries we saw this year and how things may have changed since last year. We'll share a bit about the COVID-19 and how it's impacted our community. We'll close with final trends and implications we've been seeing in the market, and then we'll save a few extra minutes at the end for Q&A. So there's a quick roadmap for today. Before we get into the data, I wanted to quickly mention a few things about our report. So this marks our 8th annual marketing research salary study. Our data is used by countless firms and professionals alike. We've actually heard from hiring managers who've told us they've used our studies to get raises, not only for their teams, but for themselves too. We have robust data and insights. We'll share some highlights today, but be sure to download our full report to get even more detail and analysis. And it's important to point out, we have a different way of collecting data. Because Karla and I are conducting interviews on a day-to-day basis, it's not just an online survey with predetermined values. We have conversations with people in the field day in and day out, so we're able to get a more accurate read on salaries in the industry. And this year, we analyzed the data of nearly 800 researchers across the U.S. We look at base salary across the industry. We slice the data by job category or level of experience. We also segment supplier-side versus client-side researchers, and then cover industry, region, gender, education, and more. Our full 30-page report includes extensive data and analysis. You'll be able to download it for free on our website after today's webinar. Now I'll hand it over to Karla to get us started.
Thank you, Kit. Good morning, everybody. This is Karla Ahern. So before we take you through the data, we think it's important to make sure that we outline exactly who we're talking about when we say marketing researchers. You may also hear Kit and me say insights professionals throughout the presentation, which is a fairly synonymous term. Okay, so marketing researchers work in a number of different areas, either quantitative and or qualitative, secondary and or syndicated, as well as primary custom research. It includes professionals within consumer or shopper insights, category management, media and audience research, as well as competitive and market intelligence. At Burtch Works, we differentiate marketing researchers from predictive analytics professionals and data scientists. Both of these groups have different skill sets and are covered in a separate study that we publish each year. These are professionals who are typically hands-on with tools like Python, R, SAS, and the way we define data scientists, because there's still not really a universal definition out there, but we define them as professionals working with massive unstructured sets of data, many of which have PhDs in computer science, operations research, or applied statistics. We also don't include web analytics professionals. And then we keep marketing and brand managers separate. They may be using insights and research, but they're a little bit further removed from how those insights are curated. So we keep them separate as well. And again, we have colleagues here at Burtch Works who cover analytics, data science, and web analytics recruiting, but we are going to keep them separate from our study and our webinar today to keep everything as accurate and focused as possible. Okay, so next let's take a look at the profile of the marketing research industry. We'll start with demographics and look at what the quote-unquote average profile may be. As you can see, the vast majority of researchers have less than 20 years of experience. 43% have 10 or fewer years of experience, and the median is 12 years. And for education, in this year's sample, everyone held a college degree, and 57% have an advanced degree, either a traditional master's, MBA, PhD, MMR.
Thanks, Karla. And here's a look at the gender breakdown. So these numbers have held fairly steady over the years. In this year's data, women came in at 56% of the group, and then men make up 44%. Still fairly close, but with a slight female skew. As we analyze the data each year, we go through and assign each professional to a category based on their current position, either supplier side or client side. The supplier side includes researchers at firms such as LRW, Kantar, Ipsos, IRI. They can range from boutique consultancies with just a handful of people to large organizations with a global footprint. But regardless of company size, these are the teams commissioned to lead research projects on behalf of other organizations. And then on the client side of things at the bottom, researchers sit in-house at companies like Facebook, Domino's, FCJ, or ConAgra. These professionals work on a dedicated researcher insights team within a broader organization. So teams can vary quite a bit, from a lean group of 1 to 5 researchers, or large teams might be 50 or even 100 people, just depending on the company. Some are hands-on and take a DIY approach, running all their own studies internally, while others tend to partner with supplier-side teams for their research needs. So once we separate the data by supplier-side and client-side researchers, we then break down each section into several sublevels. On the supplier side, there in the blue, we segment researchers primarily based on years of experience. Titles really can be all across the board on the supplier side, and they're never really apples to apples. So we use the years of experience to help guide our categorizations. You'll see we've included some examples of titles at each level just to give you an idea. In previous years, we had 3 groups on the supplier side, but in last year's 2019 analysis, we actually introduced a new 4th level to break out senior end and leadership positions. Now on the right side, for the client side of things in green, we segment by title, experience, and then often team management. There are 5 segments ranging from analyst or senior analyst with just a few years experience on the junior end, all the way up to senior directors and VPs on the senior end of things. So there's a quick cheat sheet for our categories. Now I'll hand it back to Karla to dig into the good stuff.
Thank you, Kit. So now let's get into the meat of the presentation and what everyone is most interested in, the actual salary information. Okay, so to start us off, here is a chart showing the median base salaries at all of the job levels we analyze. You'll see the client-side salaries in the light blue bars and the supplier-side salaries shown in the darker blue. In the light blue at the top, level 1 client-side professionals, which equates to analysts or senior analysts, earn a base salary of just over $85,000. Those at level 3, who are about at the senior manager level, are at $145,000. And at level 5, the executive level, the median base salary is $217,500. Taking a look at the bottom of the chart in dark blue, early career marketing researchers on the supplier side earn a median salary of $70,000 per year and move up to $91,500 per year for those with approximately 5 to 9 years of experience. And S4, which encompasses the most senior supplier side candidates, earn a median salary of $180,000. Next, we take a look at how salaries vary year over year. First, on the supplier side, compared to our 2019 report last year, levels 1, 2, and 3 on the supplier side increased single digits, while our newest category, S4, remained steady. And since we've been releasing this study for several years now, we're also able to look back at data over the past 8 years. This year, salaries rose 4% at level 1, 2% for level 2, and 2% for level 3, which are pretty much on par or slightly lower increases than what we've seen over the past couple of years. And again, as we mentioned on the slide previous, level 4 remained relatively even. Okay. Next, let's look at how client-side salaries changed since last year. For client-side researchers, we saw small increases at level 1, 4, and 5. Level 2 went down slightly. While it's not enough to raise our eyebrows, Kit and I plan to keep an eye on this level next year and the year following. We've been talking about this level quite a bit, and given that this is the level research professionals will often move from the supplier side to the client side, Kit and I have been wondering if there's perhaps a little bit less bargaining or negotiating happening just given the current climate with the pandemic. So again, we're gonna keep our eye on that level. And here we see the 8-year trend on the client side. Again, the data is mostly flat across the board, which isn't entirely surprising given we're in the midst of a global pandemic and we're in a constant state of uncertainty. As we mentioned a couple of minutes ago, we're going to keep our eye on this on level 2, but really all of the levels in the future. Okay, so we wanted to pause and recap some of the highlights from our study and sample so far. We saw base salaries increase slightly at several job levels, and data that was flat versus the prior year for many others. The increases were fairly small. The largest increase or decrease we saw was 4%. Salaries vary by industry, and this is even more true given the impact it is having on many different types of businesses and companies, even within the same industry. So for example, within healthcare, we've seen many pharma companies busier than ever. Well, a lot of hospital systems are feeling the negative impact of COVID quite a bit. So again, even within the same industry, there's a lot of differences. Year after year, it's no surprise that this is an educated group. Again, everyone in this year's sample has a college degree and a majority have an advanced degree. It remains a relatively young market. 43% of the sample has 10 or fewer years of experience. And similar to years prior, a little over half the sample is female. So Kit, I'm going to hand it over to you after the recap.
Thanks, Karla. As I alluded to earlier, 2020 has been a year of massive disruption all across the U.S. workforce. COVID-19 has had an incredible effect on our lives and the way we work. While we're now many months into the pandemic, the long-term impacts from business closings, broad work from home policies, and other restrictions on daily life are still taking shape. For this year's study, data collection ended in August, so our sample was fairly split between pre-pandemic times on the front end, and on the second half covers the months during COVID-19. While we didn't see a massive shift across the entire sample that could be attributed to the pandemic's effect, there are a few developing trends that may have a more noticeable impact on next year's marketing research data. First, layoffs and furloughs have in fact impacted the market. Back in April, in the early weeks of the pandemic, we conducted a quick flash survey to ask our network about COVID-19 and the impact it had on hiring and staffing within their organizations. With over 200 respondents roughly split between client-side and supplier-side researchers, 28% reported that their team had already gone through layoffs or furloughs, while an additional 9% said there were rumors of upcoming cuts. Even though staffing continued to develop after this point, it shows how a significant number of teams had already been affected back in April, having implications for both researchers and employers. For professionals in the field, with the prevalence of layoffs and furloughs over the last 6 months or so, there are more researchers on the market now looking for new opportunities, so there's increased competition out there for fewer open roles. If you're on the job hunt, it's critical to be tuned into the details during the interview process. Make sure you're prepared for potential homework, assessments, or presentations. We're seeing more and more companies build in additional steps into the interview process, so make sure you take them seriously. On the employer side of things, there's an influx of researchers on the market. Or for some, maybe they hadn't been looking before, but now if their position is uncertain, they may have some openness to making a change. So if you have the budget to bring on new researchers at this point, now could be a really great time to scoop up talent for your team. And one quick side note, let's take a look at the broader market unemployment from the U.S. Department of Labor. So check out January 2010 on the left side. Unemployment peaked at 10.6% at the height of the Great Recession. Now on the right side of things, the COVID-19 unemployment rate spiked in April and capped at 14.7%. Predictions from the White House back in April was that we'd hit over 20%, so luckily that didn't happen. And we're seeing things slowly improve from around 13.3% in May, just over 10% in July, 8.4% in August, and in September's edition last month reported 7.9% unemployment. This data shows that the research and insights field certainly isn't alone in the market disruption. And while unemployment remains high, numbers are trending in the right direction, so hopefully they'll continue to do so. Over to you, Karla.
Thanks, Kit. So now we wanted to talk a little bit about sort of the interview process and what that looks like. So since most insights professionals have largely been working from home for the past 7 months, this means that in-person interviews have been paused. Taking its place have been a lot more phone interviews and virtual in-person interviews handled largely by video. One of the positives to come out of this trend is more flexible scheduling. So instead of trying to find 4 hours of back-to-back availability for an in-person interview, that can now be scheduled over 4 one-hour blocks throughout the day, or over a couple of days perhaps. But some challenges have started to emerge as well. So because this is a field where employers place a lot of emphasis on soft skills and communication, we've observed more and more that companies are starting to take advantage of this flexibility by introducing additional interviewers and touch points throughout the process to help assess a candidate's fit for the role. So when we think about the impact this has on researchers, sometimes this means that the overall interview and hiring process can take longer. If you're interviewing right now, understand that it can be hard for a potential employer to evaluate fit and communication over a video interview. So be prepared for additional interviews and try to be patient. For employers hiring, we remind you to try and be mindful of the time commitment involved throughout the interview process. While we absolutely agree it should be a very thorough process and you need to vet the candidate, you can trim a couple of interviews from the schedule. You might want to think about doing that. We've seen situations arise where there are too many decision makers involved who just can't agree, and that can just really drag the process out. If this happens, it's very well possible that you might lose out on a good candidate who could take another offer during the interview process. I've talked to quite a few researchers over the past few months who've mentioned they've just gotten burnt out by too many video interviews. And actually just last week, someone told me that she was going to pull out of her remaining interviews over the next few weeks because she had just gotten an offer. And granted, it was a good offer. She was fairly excited about it, but she also told me that she had just been putting so much effort into all of the Zoom prep and all of the assignments and the assessments that she felt like she just needed to give herself a break for a couple of weeks before starting a new job so she could, start fresh and start rested. And that's actually a pretty good segue to Kit, who is going to walk you through some observations about the overall job market right now.
Thanks, Karla. So for number 3 trend here, as more researchers and insights professionals are currently looking for work, it's created an even more competitive job market. Today's postings often bring in a flood of applicants. So with this influx of researchers out there vying for fewer positions, it's changed the negotiation game a bit, as it can be a little bit tougher to negotiate salary given the current climate. For researchers, it's important in this highly competitive landscape to understand one's market value given tenure in the industry, experience, and particular skill set. While it's important to be fairly compensated, today's market is such that it may be helpful for job seekers out there to have some flexibility. And definitely don't draw a line in the sand when negotiating salary, especially if you're super excited about an opportunity. Or potentially if you're tied to a particular area. I just spoke with someone from Orlando this morning, and they weren't able to make a move. They're really tied to the location there. So potentially having some wiggle room on compensation could help open up more doors locally. So just something to keep in mind. And on the hiring side of things, it's more important than ever to be transparent about salary ranges for a particular position from the get-go. And with some of these researchers having been displaced, don't be afraid to take on someone who maybe had previously earned a base salary above the range for your position. Many of the professionals we've spoken to recently have mentioned they've actually recalibrated their expectations a bit in the midst of the pandemic and may be open to a wider target range than before.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, we hear that a lot, probably almost daily, that expectations are being reset. Okay, so on to number 4. So throughout all of our conversations with research professionals over the last many months, we have not really heard about a rush back into the office. Companies are trying to plan ahead for what a return to the office may look like. And we're also hearing that many are evaluating their work from home policies and trying to determine if they can make any positions remote permanently. So some West Coast tech companies, most famously Twitter and Facebook, have started to adopt indefinite work from home options. But again, for the most part, we haven't seen most of our clients commit to long-term remote plans at this point. So if you're a researcher, know that many organizations still value in-person interaction. And for some positions in some industries, it's vital to be able to walk over to your coworker's desk to brainstorm or have a meeting. And because of this, companies are nervous to move toward a definite work from home arrangement. Nearly all the roles that Kit and I have been working on, they still want the new hire to be local, and they still want them to be able to come into the office in the future. And for employers, we've seen this demand for work from home setups arise quite a bit. So if there's any flexibility to offer employees this option, we would encourage you to do so. It's going to help expand the talent pool beyond your office location. It could also aid with recruiting efforts, and moving forward, it could actually help give you a competitive advantage as well. If committing to a permanent work option just isn't possible, perhaps consider offering a hybrid option where the employee splits their week between the office and a remote setting. So along these lines, we wanted to walk you through a flash survey that Burtch Works conducted a few months ago. So this was actually given to analytics and data science professionals, but the results were interesting, so we definitely wanted to share them with you this morning. So back in July, when we administered this, roughly 25% of respondents thought that they might be back in the office sometime before the end of this year. Another quarter of respondents thought it would be sometime next year in 2021. And a pretty high percentage, 28%, really had no idea when they would be expected back in the office. Okay, and one more slide on the work from home, because that seems to be dominating a lot of conversations, both work and personal, for all of us lately. So a few closing thoughts. What will the longer term impacts of this be? Most of us have been doing this for about 7 months now, and it's kind of getting to be the new normal. There's certainly a wider talent pool. Clients have more options if they're open to remote arrangements. And conversely, candidates will also have more employment choices, perhaps. So maybe the two cancel each other out. I don't know. Another thing, will this reduce salaries? Again, I think there's going to be a lot of questions around this topic. Perhaps several months ago, Mark Zuckerberg said that Facebook employees would need to take salary adjustments if they choose to live away or move away from their headquarters in Silicon Valley. But again, maybe that's a trade-off people are willing to make. I don't know. Will there be onboarding challenges? For more seasoned candidates, onboarding remotely, it usually just isn't as tough. But for people in their early careers, I mean, it could be challenging, and you don't have the camaraderie of, some learning from your coworkers, and again, being able to walk over to your colleague's desk and ask them questions. Now, how will this impact long-term communication, collaboration, community, culture? Some of these things just aren't as easy to do in a work-from-home situation. And how is productivity impacted? In the beginning, people seemed pleasantly surprised at how productive everybody was, but now I think some questions are starting to come out about that. Obviously, childcare is a huge issue. A lot of the country is engaged in remote learning right now, and that could potentially be the norm for the rest of the school year. It's a really tough balancing act. I think a lot of people are really maximizing their productivity at home and figuring out ways to make it work. Myself included, waking up before the kids, doing work at night after they've gone to bed. And it's, perhaps it's possible that productivity will go up because of time shifting and, there aren't as many water cooler chats or distractions breaking up concentration during the day. Again, no one has a crystal ball, but these are all things that I think professionals as well as companies and employers are really thinking about right now. And again, Kit and I don't have the answers, but we are going to continue to have these conversations with professionals we talk to daily and really keep a pulse on the trends and keep you guys in the loop as well.
Yeah, it definitely is interesting. I know the whole work from home thing, it kind of has pros and cons. And so here for our fifth trend, while many industries and companies have been hugely disrupted as a result of COVID-19, the full effects of the uncertainty continues to develop. We've seen some organizations within industries ranging from tech, gaming or streaming entertainment, pharma, and even some CPG, for example, they've experienced surges in demand and have continued to hire throughout the crisis. But at the same time, other industries, including travel, hospitality, theme parks, and live events, they've been significantly impacted due to the unique and widespread challenges brought on by this pandemic. As the situation continues into the months ahead, it'll be important to stay aware of industry developments, and we'll likely continue to see even more changes down the road. And for number 6 here, as Karla mentioned a little bit, as any parent can attest, the combination of working from home and interruptions in childcare have significantly impacted many families and working parents. With the approach to school closings varying widely across the U.S., parents have found themselves supervising online learning, juggling childcare, and a number of other new challenges affecting daily lives. We've talked to a handful of hiring managers who've mentioned seeing an increase in requests for modified schedules from members on their team, just to make things easier and help navigate the effects of the pandemic at home. So, if and when possible, having some flexibility in working hours, just to allow for time shifting, can really benefit both researchers and employers alike. It can really be a win-win situation for both sides. So, it's definitely the year of flexibility, if possible.
If nothing else, yes, uncertainty and flexibility. So what is the future going to look like? Again, everyone wants to know. No one really has defined answers or a timeline. Probably safe to say that it will not look like this picture anytime soon, even if some of us have started to phase back into the office or will start to phase into some sort of hybrid or office work setup in the next several months. And again, Kit kind of led with this, but it feels like an understatement to call 2020 an incredibly complicated year, but that's what it's been. In only the past 7 months, we've had a global pandemic and COVID-19, presidential election coming up, major social justice movements, hurricanes, wildfires sweeping the West Coast, and of course, the controversy over TikTok. But in all seriousness, we are living in very uncertain times right now. And this uncertainty could impact next year's salary data, which Kit will discuss with you next.
So as we mentioned, this year's salary information was collected through August 2020. So likely we didn't see the full impact of the pandemic in this year's numbers. But thinking ahead to next year, there's a good chance we will. The offers that we're seeing come in are still holding strong, so that's definitely a good thing. Though we're not seeing clients or companies lowball offers at this point, layoffs and furloughs in the industry have made it more challenging for a candidate to negotiate in some cases. That's definitely something we'll be kind of keeping our eye on for next year. We've also heard about some companies temporarily reducing pay, potentially freezing salaries for the time being, or some aren't doing annual raises just in general, given the uncertainty. So we may see some impact in next year's salary report, just in terms of salary levels. And as we just mentioned, some categories and industries have been performing better than others during the crisis. So bonuses may potentially take a hit moving forward too. Especially could vary depending on the industry, but we'll be watching for some of these and other potential changes in the year ahead. And this isn't the end. We'll keep you updated with current events that may impact the research and insights world. And what's true today likely won't be true a month from now. So we'll continue to keep a pulse on things as they continue to develop and change and evolve. So that wraps our 2020 Marketing Research Salary Study webinar. Thanks everyone for joining us.
And I'm going to jump in one more time and just say, Kit and I covered a lot of information this morning. So if you're interested in taking a closer look or you want even more, definitely check out our full report. It just went up on our website this morning, and it will give you all of the demographic details, compensation breakouts, year-over-year trends, and a host of other insights. And you can download it for free on our website, burtchworks.com.
Thank you so much, Karla and Kit. This is Mary Vandenplas again. We're about to get to our Q&A in just a moment. So if you have a question for Kit or Karla, please be sure to send it in now using the chat feature. For those of you who are not familiar with Burtch Works, we are an executive recruiting firm specializing in quantitative fields like marketing research, data science, and analytics. We're the leading resource for insights about the hiring market and produce comprehensive salary reports like this one every year for our main specialty areas. Our data and insights have been repeatedly mentioned in the press, and this year, Burtch Works was once again recognized by Forbes as one of America's best recruiting firms. Of course, if you're looking to add to your marketing research or consumer insights staff, we'd be happy to speak with you and do some brainstorming about what you might have planned in terms of hiring before the end of the year or to start off 2021. We offer contingency and retained services from research analysts all the way up to chief research officer. So please feel free to send us an email if you'd like to chat. That's info@burtchworks.com. And if you're looking to post your research or insights opportunity or browse for new opportunities for yourself, you can check out our niche job board, which is trafficked by thousands of professionals in marketing research, consumer insights, category management, and much more. Aside from searches we're engaged on, our job board is open to all of our clients. So if you're just looking for a targeted place to post your job listings, definitely get in touch with us. And throughout the year, be sure to check out burtchworks.com/blog, where our recruiters post hiring market insights and other information specifically related to marketing research and consumer insights, including our resume guide, how to evaluate opportunities, and tips for writing job descriptions. You can also follow Burtch Works across our social media channels to stay up to date on our latest research. And on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/burtchworks, you can find recordings of our other presentations, including analysis of our research and insight trends survey and career planning resources just for researchers, as well as our series with executive leadership coach, Tim Ressmeyer, with topics including making successful career transitions and how you can take charge of your own onboarding in a new role. And now that I've finished that Burtch Works commercial, we can get to the good stuff and go to the Q&A. All right, so let's jump in and feel free to continue sending those questions to us for Kit and Karla. All right, so as you two both mentioned during the webinar, work from home is obviously a big topic right now. So can you talk a little bit about, to what degree are remote jobs available right now, where you can live in a different city than the company HQ?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question.
Go ahead. I can probably guarantee Kit and I are going to talk over each other here, guys. Sorry. We're not sitting next to each other.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
No, I'm going to let Kit go. Okay, go ahead.
We get that question all the time, almost daily. And I feel like it's one of those things, given the current climate and everything going on, I think people out there are kind of assuming that there are going to be a ton of remote options. Right now, almost all of the roles that we've been working on will eventually want the new hire to be in the office. So it's one of those things, even if maybe there's a delayed relocation, or they maybe aren't planning to go back into the office until June or July 2021. Ultimately, most of the companies we've been working with do want someone who's local or will be local, just to be close to the office when things do get back to normal. So we aren't seeing a ton of companies moving to full-time remote setups, at least not yet. Time will tell, though. You never know if this is still going on in 6-9 months. Things could potentially change.
All right, great. So as far as what kind of demand you're seeing in the hiring market, what's the current demand for qualitative versus quantitative research?
So this is Karla. I can jump in. So qual has certainly been hit a little bit harder, just given travel bans and 2-week quarantine bans if you go outside your state and things like that are happening all across the country. And the inability to meet in person, which is what a lot of qualitative research is rooted in, has, of course, affected that side of the business. But, on the flip side, we are starting to see qualitative professionals get more creative in their approaches. I think we were already trending that way for the past few years pre-COVID. So, it'll be really interesting to see what new innovative techniques are sprung out of COVID. And we're hearing a lot more about research being taken place within virtual communities. Even international qual sessions can be conducted virtually these days. So there's a lot out there. There's a lot of options, just given the technology that we have at our fingertips today. So it could be an interesting time for qual overall. And we might start to see longer term shifts in how qualitative research is approached and conducted. So we'll see. And again, quant has been, for the most part, remaining pretty steady. So just to address that part of the question as well.
All right, thank you very much. Next question on hiring trends, specifically which industries are hiring and what kinds of roles are you seeing specifically?
Yeah, so I think, we've been really busy with supplier side roles, mainly quant in nature. But a lot of times, the roles that we have kind of reflect the research pie out there. So qualitative is generally a smaller piece of that anyway. But yeah, in terms of a lot on the supplier side, we're also seeing a healthy dose of client side opportunities as well. The one thing about client side in particular is oftentimes we're seeing more movement in some of the categories that we mentioned earlier. So it could be pharma, gaming, streaming entertainment, potentially durable goods. There's certain areas where they've been a little bit less impacted by COVID. I guess some that are could go either way would be retail or restaurant QSR. I think, we're seeing some of those companies really pause for the time being, given the uncertainty, and others are full steam ahead. And then, not surprisingly, hospitality, travel, some of the in-person industries, entertainment, have pretty much halted hiring. There may be some cutbacks in those areas too, just as they continue to navigate the crisis here. So, but it's definitely, kind of interesting to see what industries are still moving along, and others that are maybe potentially taking a bit of a pause to see how things regulate down the line.
Awesome. All right, so now we've gotten a couple of questions about salary negotiations. Specifically, you talked a bit about flexibility in your salary range as a job seeker. So we've got questions like, how does a seasoned job seeker convince a company that they're open or a little flexible on the low end of their salary range without selling yourself short?
Oh, that's a good question. I think kind of, not just specific to that question, but I think it's always probably good to give a range that you're comfortable with. And I do think that most employers are empathetic and know what's happening right now, and, will understand that, kind of given what's happening in the world, that your salary, expectations the range may have widened a little bit. I think in the same breath, it's important to also really echo why you're interested in the role and why you're interested in the company. I think the broader implications of potentially lowering your salary band, I think no employer wants to bring someone on, and then have them jump ship in a year, perhaps when the economy starts to stabilize a little bit. So in the same breath, really, be prepared to answer the question of why this role, why this company, to show them that you're invested in the longer term, and that, yes, salary is a piece of the puzzle, it's a piece of the equation, of course, but really think about, the role as a whole and bring some reasons why, kind of convince them. And I think that could potentially help balance things out a little bit.
All right, thank you. And kind of to stay in that same vein with salary negotiation, will be our last question. We have just a couple minutes here. Is how to best approach those compensation and promotion conversations in light of the pandemic and layoffs and other reductions.
Yeah, it definitely does make it a little bit more complicated, just given everything else going on. But one thing, and we kind of mentioned this earlier, we have heard people who've had great success kind of using our salary studies as a baseline. And so while it's not a miracle worker, we've gotten feedback that it is a helpful tool just to have some examples of where, potential salaries lie in the industry, and just examples around that. The one thing, I guess, just given COVID and everything that we're dealing with this year, I think it's important to recognize that it is a tough year for companies to boost salaries, and some maybe just don't even have the flexibility. Maybe there's a complete freeze across the organization. So I think it's important to be, kind of cognizant of that. And, even if a conversation this year is to start laying the groundwork, perhaps next year there may be a little more wiggle room internally. So one of those things, sometimes it's not just one single conversation. It might be something that you kind of build a case for yourself, as time goes on.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Kit and Karla, for all of that information. And thank you to everybody who submitted questions and who joined us today. That's all the time we have. But if you want to download the full study, it's 30 plus pages of information. Head over to burtchworks.com/study to download it for free. And if you want to connect further with us, please send us an email at info@burtchworks.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for joining us today.